The Nintendo 64 for many is considered the family-friendly, upbeat and happy games console that we all loved back in the late 90s. But that doesn't mean that its games library didn't contain games which would send us into a complete rage quit. These moments when you'd get blasted with a red shell just before the finishing line, you'd get fragged by Oddjob in GoldenEye, or spend hours trying to find that last banana in Donkey Kong 64, only to die right before you figured out how to reach it. Those moments, however, are just rage quit moments. For today's video, I'm taking a look at nuclear rage moments I had with the console. Moments where I got so angry I could have murdered the next person I saw. I know I'm not alone here though. We've all been through this, and so in the comment section down below, I'd love to hear your weird and wonderful moments of pure rage with the Nintendo 64's library, and hopefully we can share some funny stories about losing our minds. As always, if you want a full review of any of the games featured in today's episode, then head on down to the description box where I'll link you up. Now on to the games. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire was one of the console's launch titles I absolutely loved. From the moment I played the game's storyline, the diversity in the level design, and the music, it all just gripped my attention. I was a huge Star Wars game fan, and I still am to this day, but there's something about these older games that just always stuck with me. From soaring through Tatooine in Rebel Assault on the Panasonic 3DO, to the Battle of Nocto in X-Wing vs TIE Fighter on PC, to blasting my way through Dark Forces back in the day. Each of these great games had their own challenges, but I think that they remained extremely fun from start to finish. The first few levels of Shadows of the Empire were awesome. Any game that starts with an epic battle of Hoth clearly shows they were packing out the big guns from the start. You then jumped into the first or third person mode depending on how you wanted to play as you escaped the Echo base as Dash Rendar, blasting all that moved to pieces. You were then flying into space to complete with the awesome asteroid belt mission and then down into Old Mantell Junkyard. The next mission is one, however, which I'll never forget, Garl effing Spaceport. For many men, just to hear of the name fills them with hate and loathing. First of all, this level is way too damn long, and it's the main level in the game which significantly reduces your lives and continues because it is tricky. You have long sections of difficult platforming, a tough mid-level boss, the jetpack sections require you to take long leaps of faith and have careful control, and all the while you've got enemies taking potshots at you from all directions. I love a challenge, and in my opinion this is one of the game's more challenging levels, especially if you're going after a 100% complete run of the game by collecting the challenge points as you play. So back in the day I got to Garl Spaceport quite easily after a couple of hours of playing the game. Sure, I had to get the game over screen on Garl Spaceport a few times when I first started learning the level, but that's pretty normal in any game you play. And sure, it's frustrating, but there's nothing out of the ordinary. Gradually I etched my way further and further into the level and progressed closer and closer to the end of it. And then that's where he showed up. Boba Fett, the Duke of my darkness, the Baron of bollocks, and the Prince of my pain. For the first time on Nintendo 64 I was walking into a nuclear meltdown and I didn't see it coming. For weeks, every time after school I would spend around 45 minutes working my way through the level to get a shot at taking on this badass, and I'd come up short each time. I tried every tactic on the books, from him always ensuring that I was moving, to remaining in the same place and just going toe to toe with him. I even stockpiled all of the special weapons and rockets from throughout the level, thinking I would just spam him with missiles and get him taken down. But no matter what I tried, nothing could seem to get the masked mauler killed. I vividly remember spending an entire Saturday, and I mean from like morning to right the way through at night time, playing the same damn mission over and over again, and no matter what I did, he just simply wouldn't die. Finally, around 8 PM I'd had enough. I admitted defeat and swore that I had a bugged copy of the game which had made Boba Fett invincible. The Monday morning I took the car into school and loaned it to my friend Nick, who had been wanting to play it. And heck, I was sure I wasn't ever going to be playing that damn game again, so why not palm it off to somebody else to play. So the next day in school I asked Nick what he thought of the game, and he said he was really enjoying it, and he said his favourite level so far was the swoop bike race. Hang on a minute, swoop bikes? What kind of witchcraft was he talking of? I hadn't seen any swoop bike level, surely he was mistaken and meant something else. But no, it turns out he completed Garl Spaceport first time and literally had no idea why I couldn't kill Boba Fett. I remember asking him to clearly explain how he'd done it, and it sounded nothing different than I had tried many times before. After he completed the entire game, I got it back, and I did defeat Boba Fett after that, but yes, this was my first meltdown moment on N64. Diddy Kong Racing may look all cute and friendly with its animal cast of childlike drivers, but don't let those bubbly visuals fool you. Wait until you get into the game's adventure mode and you'll be on the path to getting your arse handed to you. While many of you watching are probably expecting me to go straight into Dino Domain, I actually found that Jurassic Juggernaut to be quite easy both in the first and second races against him. The shortcut about halfway up the mountain makes quick work of him, and so I've never understood what people found so challenging about it. For me, however, it was that damn octopus called Bubbler, who is in the Sherpa Island boss, that would drive me absolutely insane. There's a whole host of things here which make this boss send me into a padded cell because it's a combination of all of them that make it truly horrible. Firstly, you have the controls for the hovercraft. As it bubbles around water, you have to contend with the water physics, which makes it instantly harder than, say, any of the kart-based races, and especially the bosses. Then you have Bubbler himself, who if he gets more than a second ahead of you, will leave a tide behind him which further slows you down as you try and hold on to the slim hope of keeping up with him. Then you have Bubbler dropping mines or bubbles which are incredibly difficult to avoid and make the races against him pretty much one hit and you're out affairs. Then finally, you have the fact that he makes this horrible noise which still curdles my blood every time I hear it. It's almost a cross between a laugh and a gargling piss water. As he does it so often it just becomes irritating so quickly. I remember trying to beat this one guy, it was probably a Sunday afternoon, for hours on end. I got my dad to try and beat him, I got my brother and even my sister to try and beat the race, despite the fact I knew full well I was the best of all of us at the game. None of us could defeat him no matter what tactic we tried. I remember being stuck on this boss battle for days. Maybe it was even weeks, I can't even quite remember, it just felt like an eternity, but no matter what I did I just couldn't beat him. My stress levels were rising hour after hour, until randomly one attempt I did beat him. I couldn't believe it and felt a huge sense of relief. Surely that boss was just overpowered, and the rest of the game won't be that hard. Thankfully it wasn't. That was until Wizpig showed up, and oh my god, that was even worse. This time it was definitely weeks of trying to beat him, and I couldn't get anywhere close to beating Wizpig. There were no times I was pipped on the finish line, there were no times I was just seconds away from winning, and there were no moments where I felt like I had any hope of beating him. This guy literally obliterated me time after time after time, and I just couldn't handle it. I ripped the cart out of the console, stuck it back in the box on its shelf, and started playing something else. A couple of weeks later, the same friend I mentioned before in school said that he'd gotten Diddy Kong Racing, and I told him to wait until he gets to Wizpig because he won't be able to do it. And yes, of course, he mentioned the whole Shadows of the Empire incident because, well, that's the type of banter young lads have, but I was certain this time he was going to be done for. And of course, the smug SOB comes into school a couple of days later and has beaten Wizpig and was on some space-themed tracks that I knew nothing about at the time. I had to be humble here and ask him for tips, and he said it really wasn't that hard. Just make sure I'm taking my finger off the accelerate button before going over the speed boost pads to ensure I always got the extra special boost, and it was that easy. Hang on a second. You get an extra strong boost if you get off the accelerate before going over a speed pad. Didn't everyone know that? The damn genie tells you in the game, but of course who the hell, was reading what Taj the genie was ever saying. Instead, I always used to spam next whenever he was talking to basically get him to hurry up and get on with the rest of the game. Of course, with this new knowledge in hand, I went back to the game, smashed Wizpig, smashed the space levels, smashed Wizpig's second race in space, completed the game, and then went on to unlock TT, and I could beat all of his times with this new knowledge in hand. DKR went from being one of my most hated games to one of my all-time favourite games in such a short period of time. Pilotwings 64 was a game which should be the polar opposite of being on anyone's rage moments, but despite the game's chill vibes and relaxed pace, there is a darker, deeper level of mind-melting nonsense here. The early stages of the game are indeed relaxing. Simple tasks, a slow pace, and a more relaxed scoring approach means that casual fans can pick up and play the game, enjoy it, and see their pilot licenses build up. If you get stuck, then what's to worry about? A simple jump into the Birdman mode and you're free to flap around, letting your worries and stresses drift away. But that doesn't make the problem go away, and just try completing your pilot license class and the game has a difficulty spike that nobody predicted. The beginner class, the Class A license and the Class B license more or less gently ease you into the game and lure you into a false sense of security. There was one particular mission, however, that would absolutely make me want to swear bloody murder, and that was Dark Cavern. This mission sees you having to traverse your character through the caverns, which someone who enjoys potholing would even struggle with, never mind a character with a rocket belt strapped to their back. Naturally, you can choose one of the smaller characters here, and that does make some of those narrow areas a little easier, but the incredibly tight time limit and the 2 drop sections at the end of the mission are absolutely killer. This is a level which requires you to pretty much hit 100% accuracy and speed on, and there's no leeway for any slight mistakes here. No matter how many times I played, I couldn't get this level past. I remember seeking out my beloved N64 magazine, which features a guide to the entire game in issue 6, and in terms of this level, they even went on to summarise it by saying that the time limit demands courage which borders on recklessness. They did however suggest that your only chance of completing this level was to thrust full on through all of the caverns, use the Z button for adjustments and turning, and then they also suggested the best approach for the final 2 vertical drop sections of the mission. With this new information in hand, I ventured back into the game. 7 hours and 56 minutes later, I was still nowhere near to beating this level. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where I realised that sometimes you've just got to give up. Mixing up here comes WCW vs NWO World Tour, a game filled with huge wrestlers with bodybuilder physiques, where you battle head to head for sheer pleasure, and it was probably the wrong game to get during the school holidays, but that's exactly what my brother and I did. After spending a day completing the game's championship modes and unlocking the additional characters, we naturally began having PvP matches against one another. I'd always play as the Macho Man Randy Savage, oh yeah, and my brother would play as the Giant. I can't even remember where I was going with this, but hell, I wanted an excuse to go oh yeah in this video, and so let's move on. I guarantee you'll have done the same in this game, which is when you've beaten your opponent senseless, you then refuse to pin them for the win, and instead you just keep picking them up and doing a huge move and then repeating. Spamming finishing moves was a way my brother and I would intentionally piss one another off. One particularly hot summer's day, and you know the kind that I'm talking about where it feels absolutely atomic outside, and you've just got to stay indoors to cope with the heat, well, we were having our usual brawls on the game when naturally things began to escalate. From way back in the day, maybe in the NES or the Genesis era, we would always play 2-player games. This day my brother was spamming finishers on the Macho Man Randy Savage and I was getting irate. Now when either of us would get annoyed, we had what we called control slashes. Control slashes are essentially using whatever game console it was to whip each other as hard as you possibly could. Sure, we probably broke over, well, maybe a dozen good controllers over the years doing this, so RIP to those controllers, but this particular day I was angry and I went for the face, which was always a no-go. I'll never forget the huge slap the trident-like N64 controller made as it smashed across his lips. In a split second my temper was dispersed, but 1 second later I knew that I was going to be in for a whole world of pain. You see, my brother and I are both fairly tall. I'm 6'3", and even though my brother was 13 months younger than I am, he was always taller than me. Sure, now he's like, 6'8" tall, but even back then he would have been well over 6 foot. And seeing his lip turn crimson as it split open, I knew I was about to feel the pain. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when I learned the hard way that if someone's bigger and stronger than you, don't hit them in the face with an N64 controller. And finally, for today's finale, let's just talk about BanjoKazooie. And yes, it's a great game and I love the characters, the world, the level design and the music. So let's just jump straight through to the mosh pit and say Gruntilda's final boss battle was absolutely insane hard. Cue someone in the comments section saying how easy they found her. I get it, you're a gaming god and want attention, so everybody go to the comment section, find that person, hit like on their comment because I'll be damned if we don't make somebody else's day today. But anyway, the constant swoops on a broomstick, the fireballs, the magic spells, I mean it goes on and on. It's like 10 minutes of hell, and you have to use pretty much every move and skill you've learnt during the entire game. Some phases of the battle require you to dodge projectiles, land on platforms and fire eggs on landing within a split second, which is still challenging even by today's standards. Then you have to go into the air battle with old Grunty, and you're left taking pot shots at her hoping to scratch her just a little bit to register a hit. When you finally get that phase over, the difficulty then drops considerably as the Jinjo section begins, which finishes her off. Now when it comes to final bosses on Nintendo 64, I'll probably have to do a video completely separate from this on my favourite ones, but the amount of time I put into this one was insane. I'd just get to the aerial phase of the boss battle and could never get past it. That witch would just end me right there and then, every damn time. Eventually I got past it and reached the Jinjo stage, and yet again Gruntilda would just spam you with spells, and this was all happening whilst you're just trying to load up the Ginjonators with eggs. Finally, with the Ginjonator let loose, he takes her down and finishes the job. I was furious. You didn't even get to deal the final death blow after hours of working your way through the game's challenges, and then what made it bloody worse was the fact she doesn't even die. Sure, she's trapped under a rock at the end of the game, but the game doesn't even let you think that she could possibly be dead. It basically tells you right there and then that you're going to be getting a sequel, so you didn't even get the satisfaction of feeling like you'd completed the damn game. Okay, and breathe. So that's 5 of my moments that triggered me to reach lava levels of anger, so it's over to you. And if you've made it this far into the video, I'd love to hear about any epic fights you had with your siblings over games that can be on any console, and also if you had any special attacks where you'd use controllers or accessories to beat the crap out of one another. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time.